Chakshurunmilitam jena tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Mukhaṁ karoti vachalam lankayate girim Yat kripatamahang bande Shri Gurun dinataranam Shri Chaitanya manobhishtam Stapitam yena bhutale Swayam rupa kadamahyam Dadati svapadantikam. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Preshtaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swaminiti Namine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine Panchaya Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namah. Welcome all. Happy Sunday. Happy Gita Jayanti. At least what do we call it in the U.S.? Gita Jayanti observed. Right. This is when we get the 3-day weekend or something like that. Anybody get a 3-day weekend out of Gita Jayanti? Nah, me either. Is there anyone here who has read the Bhagavad Gita? Let me see the hands. Oh, okay, this is going to be interesting. Most of you aren't familiar at all with the Bhagavad Gita. That's cool. Want me to try that one again? Is there anyone here who's read the Bhagavad Gita? Okay, y'all are messing with me. Most of us are aware of the setting of the Bhagavad Gita. Bhagavad Gita is the philosophical climax of a great epic poem called Mahabharata. It has 100,000 verses. Of course, we know the dramatic climax of the Mahabharata is what comes just next, right? This war that went on for 18 days. So the Mahabharata is seen as a kind of history of India. It recounts, generations of drama leading up to this. And this is, the speaking of the Bhagavad Gita is actually the high point of the Mahabharata. Mahabharata was composed to present the principles of Dharma for people who weren't so, philosophically inclined that they were going to sit around and memorize the Upanishads and the Vedic Samhitas. It's the teachings of Sanatana Dharma presented in this great drama. So I've commented occasionally that sometimes among the devotees, when there are little sparks going on, because we're all different people, and sometimes there's a little tension. And of course, this very rarely happens. But it does occasionally, where there's a little tension between a couple of our friends, and someone might say, "Excuse me, Prabhu, more Rama and less drama." To which I generally respond, have you actually read the Ramayana? It's just this big melodrama, right? It's a big soap opera. And the Mahabharata is an even bigger soap opera, and it spans many, many generations. And it leads up to this point. This is a war that happens Well, it's a fratricidal war, right? This is a war between cousins, first cousins. They grew up like brothers. They didn't get along so well, but they grew up together. They were educated together. And all of a sudden, here they are on opposite sides on the verge of this great war. And just before the war commences, Arjuna asks his chariot driver. Anybody know who Arjuna's chariot driver was? His chariot driver is Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Chariot driver is generally kind of a subordinate position to the warrior. The warrior is the star on the chariot, like the big golf star. I don't know who the big golf stars are anymore. And the chariot driver is like a caddy. So he's not just someone to haul the golf bag around, because the caddy knows, he knows the conditions, he knows the course, and he knows the golfer. So he can advise the or she can advise the golfer, what weapons to use, or, what clubs to use for what holes, or wherever they are on a particular hole. So the charioteer is actually, it's a subordinate position, it's a service position, but really, really important, because he helps the warrior on the chariot, the big star, make decisions where to go and which weapons to use for which particular fighters. So just as this war is about to commence, Arjuna asks Krishna to please pull his chariot up in between the two armies so that he can get a sense of what we're about here. What is the task he's about to undertake? And this leads to an existential crisis. Arjuna ends up having like a nervous breakdown. He falls apart before the battle commences, because Krishna draws the chariot up in front of probably his two closest attachments on the other side of the field. His teacher, Dronacharya, and his great uncle, who is essentially, practically speaking, the grandfather of both parties, the leaders of both armies. And Arjuna just loses it. And he tells Krishna, this is a bad idea. Not going to do it. He kind of falls to the ground. He drops his bow. He drops his quiver full of arrows. And he tells Krishna, I'm not going to fight. And to justify that, he makes an argument of how all the ways that he sees this is going to be detrimental to society, to himself. Just so many arguments. And they're all pretty dharmic arguments on their face. And of course, Krishna accepts them and says, "Oh, okay, you're right. Let's forget the whole thing, and I'll go home and watch the game or something." Nope. Krishna kind of slaps him down. He calls him on it. He's a little harsh. He says, "What you're speaking sounds good, superficially. Sounds reasonable, sounds logical, sounds dharmic. But in this situation, it's really a foolish argument. It just doesn't, it doesn't make any sense." Essentially, Arjuna has proposed that it would be better for him to go to the forest or the mountains and sit down and meditate, just become a yogi. Krishna is going to convince Arjuna. So Arjuna's thinking, yogi, that's the guys who go to the forest. Just like we've got Kumbh Mela coming up in India, this huge festival. I think they're expecting 50 million or more people. They erect a city on a plain by the Ganges. And 50 million people come from all over India, including armies of yogis, wild yogis who live in caves, live in the forest, haven't spoken to a person in years. They've just sat meditating or, doing some kind of activity for the purification of their own souls and of the world. And then they come down. They all come together, millions and tens of millions of people. And what made me think of the Kumbh Mela? There was something that made me think of the Kumbh Mela. I've been getting texts from my dear friend Kusha Devi, who's temple president in Honolulu. And she and I have known each other for 55 years. And so she's like a sister. So she's sending me these things, trying to tempt me to come to the Kumbh Mela. A little wild for me. I'm a really introverted person. And 50 million people is kind of a big crowd. I'm not sure whether I would survive it. So here we are, ready to embark on this thing. And Arjuna is telling Krishna, I'm just not going to fight. And Krishna is telling Arjuna, bad idea. And so he explains to him over 600 odd verses in the Bhagavad Gita why he should do his duty. That's all he's really asking him to do. You were born, bred, and trained to be a warrior, to protect the society. And the guys on the other side, I know they're your cousins, but somehow or other they just went wrong. They're not godly. They're actually materialistic, quite selfish people. And if they were to rule the world, it would not be beneficial for all the citizens of the world. So he argues from so many angles of vision. And I'll show you in a few minutes where he ends up. 6:49, okay. I put the clock up here so I could actually see it. So that's a little bit of the context for the Bhagavad Gita. I was listening earlier today or sometime yesterday, I can't remember, very recently, to a talk given by one of our members who's from the former Soviet Union, Bhakti Swami. Very dedicated, very scholarly devotee. And the people to whom he was addressing had asked him to give a little background, tell a little bit about his experience encountering Krishna consciousness and a little bit about trying to practice and preach Krishna consciousness under a Soviet rule, an aggressively atheistic regime back then. And so he told us that it sounded as though he was probably still working on his PhD, as a PhD in biochemistry. And he was still working on his PhD, and one of his friends gave him a book. He said, you should read this book. And it was Bhagavad Gita. It wasn't Bhagavad Gita as it is. It was, I think he said it was a Bhagavad Gita, translation of Bhagavad Gita published by the Theosophical Society. Interesting that there was still a Theosophical Society then. I think of the Theosophical Societies like an early 19th century. Madame Blavatsky. And you know where her headquarters was? Point Loma. What is now Point Loma Nazarene University. Back in the 60s, it was California Western University. But before that, it was the headquarters for Madame Blavatsky's Theosophical Society. That's just an interesting local note. I know this because my sister went to Cal Western for a couple of years. So he gave him this Bhagavad Gita, and it was really kind of hard for him to understand. A lot of flowery language, a lot of abstractions. But somehow or other, it affected him to the extent that he knew that he had to change his life. And eventually, he started chanting and started reading Bhagavad Gita as it is, a devotional presentation of Bhagavad Gita. And that made me think of my own encounters with Bhagavad Gita, which go back actually to my teenage years. I think I was 15 or 16 the first time I tried reading Bhagavad Gita. When I was a kid, 11, 12, 13 years old, I had a hobby collecting stamps. I don't know if people still do that. I mean, we don't even use we don't write letters or postcards or anything anymore. What's going to happen to all the stamp collecting? You know, what are the kids going to do? They're going to collect NFTs on their phone or something like that. And I don't even know what that means. And I came across a stamp. I was putting stamps in one of my albums one day, and I came across a stamp from India. And it had a picture of Mahatma Gandhi at a spinning wheel. And it said, Mahatma Gandhi, India, Mahatma Gandhi, whatever it was, 3 paisa or something like that. And I asked my mom, who's Mahatma Gandhi? And she said, we got an encyclopedia in the next room. Go find out for yourself. And I found myself kind of fascinated with this fellow. And I was reflecting, I was reading about him, I guess, when I was a teenager, and I read that he read the Bhagavad Gita every day. That was his source of not just wisdom, but solace and inspiration. And when he had a problem, he consulted the Bhagavad Gita. And I thought, okay, so that sounds like a book I probably ought to check out. So I did. I went. They didn't have it at the Mount Vernon High School library. I don't know why. But I got it at the Bellhaven branch, I think, of the Fairfax County Library. I lived in the Washington, D.C. area then. And tried reading it, and I couldn't make any sense out of it. It just... However, a few years later, when I was in the Navy, I served as an intelligence analyst in the Navy during the Vietnam conflict. So my job, a part of my job, was reviewing aerial reconnaissance photography of what we were doing to Southeast Asia, North and South Vietnam, Cambodia, and Laos. And it was disturbing. And it really got me thinking again. And I remembered Gandhi's movement was his movement for Indian independence was a movement based on nonviolent civil disobedience, inspired Dr. Martin Luther King when I was a boy. And so I started, when I was in the Navy, I started reading everything I could by and about Gandhi. And I thought, okay, I'm going to try the Bhagavad Gita again. And I tried reading 3 different editions of the Bhagavad Gita. And I was just lost. I think part of my problem was that I was trending very heavily pacifist at the time, because I was just so freaked out by what I had to do every day. But I think another obstacle might have and so the battlefield setting kind of, was a little difficult for me to deal with. I'm thinking, got this great spiritual discourse going on a battlefield, and he's telling them to fight? I don't know about that. And I think the other thing was the beginning of the first chapter. 2/3 of the first chapter is just a list of these really exotic names for which I had no context. I didn't grow up with the Mahabharata. I didn't even grow up. I did grow up with the Bible, but it was because I was the only person in my family, starting when I was 9 years old, who went to church regularly. But that's a whole different story. So I was a little frustrated. And then while I was still in the Navy, I went to a rock and roll concert. It was a Jimi Hendrix concert. And this was in the spring of 1969 in Honolulu at the Waikiki Shell. And there were devotees of Krishna there, chanting Hare Krishna. Now, the name Krishna was familiar to me. Actually, it struck me as familiar even before I think I knew about Gandhi, because there was a cult leader up in the LA area named, he called himself Krishna Venta. I don't remember the name of his cult, but some of his disgruntled ex-followers drove a pickup truck loaded with dynamite onto the compound and killed him and a whole bunch of other people. And so he was in the news when I was living in LA, when I was 10, 11 years old. But when I heard this guy's name was Krishna Venta, I thought, oh, somehow or other the name Krishna, I was listening. He was weird. And the stuff he was saying was even weirder. But I was listening, the name Krishna Venta was kind of like going around in my head. So when I heard them chanting Hare Krishna, I was a little familiar with the name Krishna, but also because back then there was a very popular musical called Hair, tribal, what do we call it? The tribal rock musical or something like that. And tribal rock opera. And part of, one of the songs ended up with the Hare Krishna mantra. And that was the song in Hair that I resonated with most. I thought I liked a lot of the others because they were cute and a little naughty, and they were against the man. That was cool. I was fine with that. But the one that would come into my head sometimes was the Hare Krishna mantra. So when I heard devotees chanting, it was like a whole different experience. And I was a little I had problems being in the Navy. I wasn't happy. And I had determined that I would never join anything ever again in my life. So although I was very attracted to the chanting and the devotees, I would stay away. I would stand I would actually go chant with them, but on the other side of Kalakaua Avenue in Waikiki. But one night, I think it was probably December of '69, I turned around to go back to my house, and there was a devotee standing right at my elbow waiting for me. And he talked me into coming to the feast in the park the next day. And so I went and I chanted Hare Krishna, and one of the devotees, that same devotee, recognized me from the night before, sat down with me, and he asked me, kind of figuring out where I was. Do you go to the university or what, And he said, have you ever read Bhagavad Gita? And I said, well, I've tried reading 3 or 4 different editions, and I couldn't penetrate it at all. It didn't make any sense to me. And he showed me Prabhupada's Bhagavad Gita as it is, and this was 1969, so all we had was the abridged one with the kind of purplish blue cover. And he said, have you read this edition of Bhagavad Gita? I looked at it and I said, oh no, I haven't seen that. And I went through and I read a couple of pages here and a couple of pages there, just at random. And I remember looking at the devotee, his name is Turya Das, and I said, I'm not sure how, but this makes more sense to me than anything I've ever read. He just smiled. Yeah, you're one of us. So that was my first real encounter with Bhagavad Gita. I had these frustrated, kind of abortive attempts to try to understand the Bhagavad Gita. But it was as if the Gita was waiting for me to be ready. Needed a little more Hare Krishna chanting, I guess, before I could really enter into the Bhagavad Gita. So I thought I'd read a little bit from the beginning of Srila Prabhupada's introduction and then the end, and see what that brings up. I remember, the fact is, I didn't have any money when I went to that feast. I hadn't been working. Actually, I'd had a job as a busboy at a restaurant, a new restaurant. Anybody ever work at a restaurant that's just opened? Oh man, that's hard work. So I had this job as a busboy, but I hated every minute of it. And one morning I woke up a little late. I woke up 5 or 10 minutes after I was supposed to have already been at work. Took one look at my alarm clock and said, forget it. So, I mean, I'm not sure I had to, I think the night before I had probably given Turidas my last 15 cents. And, but then I thought, I got to get a copy of the Bhagavad Gita. I need a couple of bucks to get, and I remembered that at that restaurant where I had worked, when I quit, I just kind of like didn't go back. And I had a paycheck waiting for me there. So I went and got that paycheck so I could buy a copy of Bhagavad Gita. And then I started going to the classes at the temple 3 nights a week. Back then, we had Gita, I think we had Gita classes Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays, and Tuesday, Thursdays, and Saturdays. We would go down to Waikiki and have kirtan on the streets. And I remember even before I started going to the classes, I was reading this introduction of the Bhagavad Gita, and boy, was it a revelation. It's like every page there were like 2 or 3 things that just kind of blew my mind. So Srila Prabhupada says, the spirit of the Bhagavad Gita is mentioned in the Bhagavad Gita itself. It's just like this. If we want to take a particular medicine, then we have to follow the directions written on the label. We cannot take the medicine according to our own whim or the direction of a friend. Right, isn't it? You find out you got something and all of a sudden all your friends are going to tell you, oh, this is what you have to do. Oh, you need to take this. You need to do this. You need to change your diet this way. Well, all of a sudden you're besieged with their good wishes. Or don't do this, don't go to the doctor, whatever. We've got all kinds of opinions in the world today. It must be taken according to the directions on the label or the directions given by a physician. Similarly, Bhagavad Gita should be taken or accepted as it is directed by the speaker himself. The speaker of Bhagavad Gita is Lord Sri Krishna. He's mentioned on every page of Bhagavad Gita as the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Bhagavan. Of course, the word Bhagavan sometimes refers to any powerful person or any powerful demigod, and certainly here Bhagavan designates Lord Krishna as a great personality. But at the same time, we should know that Lord Sri Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, as is confirmed by all great acharyas or spiritual masters like Shankaracharya, Ramanujacharya, Madhvacharya, Nimbarka Swami, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and many other authorities of Vedic knowledge in India. So one of the things that really changed the way I saw everything in a very concrete way was a little later in the introduction where Srila Prabhupada says that if we want to understand the Bhagavad Gita, we first need to accept, at least theoretically, he says, that Krishna is who he says he is. If we read the Bhagavad Gita through that filter, it'll make perfect sense. And I thought, that is probably why I couldn't get the Bhagavad Gita at all before. Because I didn't, I had some sense that Krishna was a great personality, very godly or something, but that he's the absolute truth, that was a foreign idea to me. But when I read that in the introduction, I thought, okay, let me try that. Let me try reading it. And somehow or other, I got through all those names, and then I got to where the conversation starts toward the end of the first chapter. And I remember going to those Bhagavad Gita classes at the Hare Krishna temple in Manoa Valley in Honolulu. There were really only there were only like 6 devotees living in the temple. There were 6 Hare Krishna devotees in the state of Hawaii, all the Hawaiian Islands. And I remember asking the same question 3 nights in a row, because that pacifist trending, remember? So I asked about how is it that this is being spoken on a battlefield, and Krishna is exhorting Arjuna to fight. It didn't compute to me. This got this spiritual message wrapped in a package that looks like a battle cry almost. And the first time I got an answer, and it kind of explained the difference between the body and the self, body and the soul, and the difference between nonviolence on a kind of superficial level and nonviolence on a deeper level affecting the soul. And it was made logical sense to me. But the next day, I just couldn't remember what the heck he said. So the next time I went to a Gita class, I asked the same question. Third time, it started to click. I have another story from my childhood, but it's not appropriate now, and clock is ticking, about my early childhood, in case anyone might think that I ever showed any signs of being particularly spiritually precocious. I was a lunkhead. I had to hear the same answer 3 times, 3 times in a row before it actually got in there. And after a few weeks of doing that, and going to the temple to help out with their gardens, and I realized at a certain point, I'm spending more time up here than I am with my friends or surfing. I was chanting more and surfing less. And there were, maybe whole weeks when I didn't even know how the waves were because I just didn't go to the ocean to check them out. And so I thought, okay, let me try this out. So I ended up moving into the temple. Not everybody has to do that. Although we had one devotee here for many years, a very dear friend of my family's. Anybody here remember Ratna Vrinda? Yeah. Wonderful Brazilian lady. She's probably 2 or 3 years older than my parents. Moved into the temple when she was 50 years old. And her husband was reluctant to move in. So she said, okay, whenever you want to see me, you know where to find me. And he ended up following her, and they were initiated by Srila Prabhupada as his disciples a couple of years, maybe 3-4 years later. Really, really wonderful lady. So, when we try to understand the Bhagavad Gita, what we have to understand is that where it always comes to is bhakti, over and over and over again. And I didn't follow up on my self-assigned homework project from yesterday morning to look to see how many times in the verses themselves the word bhakti is mentioned in one form or another. But we found, Matthias, where's Matthias? What was the number yesterday? 95. 95, including purports. So I still have this project where I've got to go through and see how many times it's actually mentioned in the verse. But it always comes to this. Always comes back to bhakti. So, and there was one more thing about the introduction to the Bhagavad Gita that I found absolutely fascinating, although I wasn't sure I really understood what it was saying. That we can have different kinds of relationships with the absolute truth. Passive appreciation, kind of a subordinate servitor, being a friend to God, a parent or a lover, I thought, okay, I'm going to find out about this stuff. And so this, just the introduction to the Bhagavad Gita itself is, it's an amazing document. I remember when I came across the tape recordings of Srila Prabhupada dictating this. It's 3 hours long. And I must have listened to it more than 100 times in a certain period of time. I just, somehow or other, I just couldn't get enough of it. So the Bhagavad Gita, as we all know, is this amazing spiritual instruction from the Lord himself to his friend Arjuna, who was actually standing in for us. Krishna spoke this to Arjuna so that we would benefit. And just studying the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says at the end, the very end of the Gita, that anyone who studies this actually worships him using their intellect, using their intelligence. So this is a very powerful text. And at the end of his introduction, he cites some verses, I think they're from the Padma Purana, Gita Mahatmya chapter. I think I've read from the Padma Purana, a very ancient text. And these texts glorify the Gita as a sacred text. So one is, one may cleanse himself daily by taking a bath in the water, but if one takes a bath even once in the sacred Ganges water of Bhagavad Gita, for him the dirt of material life is altogether vanquished. Powerful statement. And then in the next verse he says, because Bhagavad Gita is spoken by the Supreme Personality of Godhead, one need not read any other Vedic literature. This is the essence of all the teachings of the Vedas, right here in the Bhagavad Gita. One need only attentively and regularly hear and read Bhagavad Gita. In the present age, people are so absorbed in mundane activities that it is not possible for them to read all the Vedic literatures. But this is not necessary. This one book, Bhagavad Gita, will suffice because it is the essence of all Vedic literatures, and especially because it is spoken by the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And then there's 2 more verses from the Gita Mahatmya that and I really like this one. The Sanskrit is Sarvopanishado Gavo Dogdha Gopalanandana Parto Vatsa Sudhir Bhokta Dugdham Gita Amritam Mahat. This Gita Upanishad, the Bhagavad Gita, is the essence of all the Upanishad. The essence of all the Upanishads is just like a cow. And Lord Krishna, who's famous as a cowherd boy, is milking this cow. Shri Shri Radha Giridhari Jagannath Baladev Subhadra Ki Jai. Shri Giri Govardhan Ki Jai. My Lord and Savior, Giri Govardhan. And Krishna, who is famous as a cowherd boy, is milking this cow. Arjuna is just like a calf. He's drinking the milk of the Bhagavad Gita. And learned scholars and devotees, and pure devotees, are to drink the nectarian milk of the Bhagavad Gita. And then, this is a theme that I come to sometimes. I think I've given a class, Sunday talk here from the first 2 paragraphs of Srila Prabhupada's preface to Srimad Bhagavatam. So this is another verse. It says, Ekang Shastram Devaki Putram Gitam Eko Devo Devaki Putra Eva Eko Mantras Tasya Namani Yani Karmapyekam Tasya Devasya Seva. So Ekam Shastram Devaki Putra Gitam. Let there just be one scripture in all the world. That's that which is sung by the son of Devaki. Eko Devo Devaki Putra Eva. Let there be one God for everybody. Again, son of Devaki. And let there be one mantra, the holy names of the Lord, for the whole world. So Srila Prabhupada says, in this present day, people are very much eager to have one scripture, one God, one religion, and one occupation. Therefore, ekang shastram devaki putra gitam. Let there be one scripture, only one common scripture for the whole world, Bhagavad Gita. He's not saying that we should get rid of all the others, but he says, whatever you want, you can find it here. Eko devo devaki putra eva. Let there be one God for the whole world, Sri Krishna. Eko mantrastasya namani. And one hymn, one mantra, one prayer. The chanting of his name. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. And karmapyekam tasyas devasya seva. Let there be one work only, the service of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So I want to stop here and open things up, but I want to lead with. Comes Phil Donahue with the mic. He's way too young to know what the heck I'm talking about. And not even Merkin, right? So that's like. I'd like to ask if anyone would be willing to share a favorite Bhagavad Gita verse with the rest of us. We have a winner right here in the front. Dwijamani. We have an eager participant. What is your name?
Hasini.
Okay, and your favorite verse?
Patram pushpam palam toyam yo me bhaktya prayachati tad aham bhakti uppahartam ashnami prayatatmanaha.
Oh, beautiful. And the translation?
If everyone offers me a leaf, a flower, a fruit, or water with love and devotion, I will accept it.
It's one of my favorites too. I talk about that verse all the time. And that's one verse, two mentions of bhakti, one in each line. Thank you so much. That's wonderful. Yes, what is your name?
My name is Arya, and my favorite sloka is Sarva Dharman Parityajya Mamekam Sharanam Braja Aham Tva Sarva Papebhyaha Mokshayishyami Ma Suchaha. Chapter 18, sloka 66, and the meaning is the description is like I surrender to you. We should surrender to Krishna.
Yeah, I cite that verse all the time too. Thank you so much, Arya. It says, let everything else go. Forget all the stuff we've been talking about and just take shelter of me exclusively. And if there's any problems incurred by that, I've got you covered. Masuchaha. Don't worry, you pretty little head. Yeah. Anybody else? Doesn't have to be kids. Grown-ups can play too.
My favorite verse is 11:11.
Okay.
I'm going to be embarrassing myself compared to the children because I don't know the Sanskrit or even the verse. But I believe it is something along the lines of when Krishna reveals himself to Arjuna in his infinite form. And that's 11:11. It's my favorite verse.
Yeah. Kind of blows Arjuna's mind.
Yeah.
Just completely pops his circuits. Anyone else? Dravida Prabhu.
522.
Okay. Oh.
Yahi sangsparjita. No. How's it go? Yahi sangsparjita boga dukkha yona evate. Ajantavantam konteya neteshu ramite buddha. Intelligent person does not take part in the pleasures that are due to the contact of the senses with the sense objects. O son of Kunti, such pleasures are the causes of all misery, and they have a beginning and an end. And so the wise do not delight in them. Hare Krishna.
Thank you. Yeah. Okay, we have someone up front. What is your name? Oh, nice. And your favorite verse?
Madmana bhava madbhakto madhya jivam namaskuru mame vaishyasi yuktvaivam atmanam madparayanaha.
And which verse is that?
I think it's chapter 9 or wait. No.
934. Yeah.
And it means engage your mind always in thinking of me, become my devotee, offer obeisances to me, worship me, and surely you will come to me without fail.
I do that one all the time, together with another verse. Anyone got another famous verse, our favorite verse that sounds a lot like that one? Anybody? Any takers? 1860? Yes.
Can I do it again?
Sure.
Another one.
Oh, okay. Oh, of course.
So this is chapter 4, I think sloka 8, 7 and 8. Yada yada hi dharmasya glanirvavati bharata abhyudhanam dharmasya tathaatmanam srijanyaham paritranaya sadhunam vinashaya cha dushkritam dharma samsthapanarthaya sambhavami yuge yuge. And this means like I am your soul. I am everything. I am everything. I am you. I am me. I am the, what is it called? I am old age. I am young age. I am everything.
Okay. The enthusiasm is building among the kids. Let's get some of the old geezers excited here.
So I don't know like exactly which chapter and the verse what is, but I don't know the sloka. Vasam sijirna niyata vihaya navani grihnati naroparani tatta sharirani vihaya jirnani anyani samyati navani dehi. Just as a person changes clothes, giving up the old ones, the soul accepts new bodies, giving up the old and useless ones.
Yeah, this is a really important verse. Thank you. Wait, let's see if there's anyone else. You guys are great, and we could sit here and listen to you all night. But I want to see if there are any other hands. Okay, we're just digging the kids. Okay, that works for me. I'm going to have to watch it on the YouTube. Okay. Next shloka.
Yatra Yogeshwara Krishna Yatra Partho Dhanurdharaha Tatra Shri Vijayo Bhutir Dhruvanitir Matir Mama. Krishna is
Krishna is the supreme mystic. Arjuna is the supreme archer. When they are together, there is surely victory
and opulence,
a lot of power and morality.
Yes. Yes, please.
Okay, so this sloka is what chapter is it? I think, it's chapter 15, verse 18. Vidya Vinaya Sampanne Brahmane Gavihastani Shuni Chaiva Swapake Cha Pandita Samadarshinaha. And it means the humble sages by virtue of true knowledge see with equal vision a gentle and brahmana, a cow, an elephant, a dog, and a dog eater.
Cool. Wonderful. Okay, one more.
Three, two, one. Yat karoshi yadashnasi, yat juhosi dadasya, yat tapasyasi kaunteya, tat kurushva madarpanam. Whatever you do, whatever you eat, whatever you offer or give away, do that. Oh yeah, whatever austerities you perform, do that, O son of Kunti, as an offering to me.
Thank you.
With love.
And that comes right after the first verse we heard, right? Patram pushpam palang toyam, and then that verse. Yat karoshi yadashnasi. So in 26, he's saying, if you offer it with love, however simple your offering might be, I'll accept it. It doesn't need to be something fancy. It doesn't need to be some big project or something like that. Something as simple as a leaf of flower, some fruit, or some water. If you offer it with love, I'll accept it. And in the next verse he says, and make everything in your life like that. Offer everything in your life to me. Yes, okay, one more, because the hook's gonna come and
3, 2, 1. No, it's Raja.
Raja Vidya Raja Guhyam Pavitram Idam Uttamam Pratyakshavavagham Dharmyam Susukam Karto Avyayam. This knowledge is the king of education, the most purest knowledge.
It's the most secret of all
secrets. It is the purest knowledge because it gives direct perception by self, by realization. It is the perfection of religion,
and it is everlasting and joyfully performed.
I think that it's good for us to end on that very high note. Of course, I can't find a low note anywhere in that text, but this is a real high note. Krishna says that Manmana bhava madbhakto madhyaji mam namaskuru twice, right? Once right in the middle of the Bhagavad Gita at the end of the 9th chapter, and then again right at the end of the Bhagavad Gita. And what he's saying is, essentially what he's saying is just love me. Because when we actually love somebody, we think about them all the time. We do what we can to. And when he says, he's really asking us to make our lives, just like back in the 9th chapter, an offering to him. And that's the real message of the Bhagavad Gita, that we should learn how to love Krishna. And by loving Krishna, as I've talked about before, we learn how to love everyone, because we see everyone as being connected with Krishna and therefore with each other as well. So that's one of the things that I got out of the Bhagavad Gita. Thank you all so much. Srimad Bhagavad Gita ki jai. Gaur Bhakta Vrinda ki jai.